It's Sunday. It's the Rolling Stones. It's all put together. And you know what? As we're rolling into that Christmas vacation, that 2024, 2023, goodbye, coming around here, but it's not done. Today is the last show of 2023, the flagship show with an awesome guest that everybody knows. And if you don't know, where have you been? Get out of that rock right there. But we'll get our guest going right now. Josh Tabat, proud principal of Memorial Pathway Academy in Garland ISD, Garland, USA, ready to learn with you. You know what? It's that time to relax, sharpen them tools, but also go love our families. Because you know what? One thing or the other, we always sometimes put him second or sometimes third because of what comes with our chairs. But ultimately, this is a season to enjoy, reflect, and always do the best part, which is love our families. So if you are in Hawaii, if you are in Alaska, if you are in Maine or in Florida or anywhere in the 48, if you're watching this on the rebroadcast, like it and share it. The algorithm needs to push all of this awesome knowledge together because we're in the same business, the kid business. What do you think about that, Dean Packard?
You're absolutely right. We are in the kid business. You know what, Josh? I reflect back and look at all the great personalities we've had on over another year of sessions here on Unlock the Middle. And it's just been nothing less than spectacular to hear what people are doing in the trenches to make it better for others, man. And tonight, we're not going to disappoint. Man, we got an author, we got a speaker, we got a district leader, we got somebody who just changes the trajectory of learning and teaching for around the nation. So we're excited. My name is Dean Packard. I am proud principal at Bay Path Regional Vocational Technical High School here in Massachusetts. And again, Sunday night is all about getting a little bit better. Great to see you, man. How has your Sunday been so far?
You know what? I just flew in from El Paso. One of my colleagues.
Of course you did.
Our generation, our of admin, you old man, you too. We're retiring already, you know? And so my friend tapped out. He's finished in a couple of days. So I just surprised him a good retirement party. So it's awesome to go there and see people I've worked with. I've been in 13 schools, and that was one of the schools that I've been at. So it was a joy to see all the different people from the different campuses that I've supported. But ultimately, that my friend is now chapter 2 of life, which is retirement after grades are posted. So it was a great journey going back home, enjoying that. But most importantly, my friend, my compa, Dr. Sanchez, blessings to you, my man.
Yeah, good stuff right there. And you know what? We don't give enough back in those type of circles. And I'm glad you did that, Josh. I'm sure he was shocked and happy to see you. Again, there are people in this business that's got us where we are today. Those are the type of people that you pay the respect for as you go down the road. So, hey, let's turn gears for a second. We got Joe Sanfelippo with us here tonight. Joe is a rock star. Let's bring him in right now. Joe's on special assignment, pole vaulting duty, I think, somewhere out in the Midwest. Joe, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to connect and talk a little bit. Yep, I'm at pole vault duty. Daughter's in doing pole vault practice, and I am in literally like a field of some kind, which is better than the last time. I was like, usually when I'm on a podcast, I'm like in a van down by the river. At least I'm not in a van down by the river, but you wouldn't even know it because there's trees everywhere. It's dark, but I'm ready to roll. So thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you.
I love it, man. And what you do each and every day makes a difference for so many people, Joe. And for those who don't know you, and I can't say there's that many out there that don't, because I think if in the field of education, you know what you're all about. But can you just give the audience out there a little background about you, your origin, how you came to where you are today, the road you took, things of that nature?
Yeah, appreciate it. So I used to I taught kindergarten, I taught second grade, I taught fifth grade. I coached at the high school. I was a school counselor, and I was an elementary principal for 8 years and a superintendent for 12 years. So yeah, that's kind of the whole run. I retired in July. So you're talking about retirement? Yeah, retired in July, which has been interesting. It's a weird, we can get into that later. It's a super weird feeling, but I've had a wonderful time connecting with groups all across the country, talking to leaders about how we can put ourselves in different positions and create momentum, not only for the people that we serve, but, we're in charge of taking care of the adults, taking care of the kids, but there's not a lot of people taking care of the adults who are taking care of the adults who are taking care of the kids. And I'm hoping that we can help people along the way with that. So it's been super fun to do, but yeah, this is year 26. It's year 26 in the buildings, and so this is the first year out of the buildings in the last 27, and I'm still trying to navigate what that's supposed to feel like. But more opportunities to connect with people and talk about it, and hopefully we can get people going in the right direction or help them feel like the work that they're doing has some value.
Well, you say retirement, I say changing chapters, because I don't think you're ever going to retire, man. I think you'll think of your impact just a little bit differently in
A
some
little bit.
capacity. So I love that. Josh, you're up, bro.
So let's find out a little bit more about Joe. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So how were you as a student in high school? What kind of student were you? Not only that, but all the support that you received from your family. How did that influence you up to leaving the superintendency and as a speaker? So how did your parents influence who you are today? And how were you as a student?
Yeah, well, as a student, I wasn't a great student. In fact, I was a horrible student. I think there was I think I was just always trying to find my way, and I would look at what I needed to meet eligibility numbers just so I could play ball. Like that's really all I tried to do was try to stay eligible. I didn't have too much of a like a desire to be part of the whole educational program. I liked being with my friends and everything that went along with it. So I wasn't a great student. I was actually probably a better behaved student in high school than I was in elementary school and middle school, only because I wanted to stay eligible to play. Elementary and middle school, I realized that schools weren't, classrooms weren't built with stages, and I apparently needed one. So I found myself in the principal's office more than once, and now I often joke about high school that I've currently written more books than I read in high school, which is probably something that we should talk about. But I think what I was always hoping for was like the connection to why we do what we do, and I didn't get that until college. And when I got to college and I started thinking about working with kids and coaching and everything that went along with it, then I started to see more purpose in what in what that looked like. So it was an interesting run, but at the same time, I did have people supporting me the whole. My parents were very supportive of what I did. They also wanted to make sure that I stayed eligible. And we had a couple coaches in high school, one in particular that I still connect with today that really kind of gave me the push to get into education and work with kids. And I think that's I keep going back to those conversations, and thankful for him. His name is Tom Nisus, and he's just a wonderful human being. And just to get me involved in the coaching part of it, as well as knowing and seeing that I was at my best when I was working with kids. And he made sure that was part of something that I wanted to do in the future. So it's been a pretty good run so far. The superintendency is a little bit different. I think I got to the superintendency because we were in a bigger school district. I was a principal in a bigger school district, and my wife I know that she wanted to get to a place where we were in a smaller school district at some point. And when a principal opening came about in a smaller district, I took it. And I was talking to the superintendent, and he said, "Hey, if you want to be a superintendent, this is probably going to be a great place for you. I'm going to stick around for 3 years. And then after that, that might be an opportunity for you if you think that it's a good fit and if they think it's a good fit for you or whatever." Well, after 6 months, he came into my office and he's like, "Hey, so I'm going to leave." And I'm like, "Wait." He's like, "Yeah, no, you're ready. You're going to be great." I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." So I ended up being a superintendent about 3 years before I thought I would. And it was the most incredible experience that I had over the course of 12 years in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, with the most amazing educators and the most incredible community that I ever could have hoped for. And I think we hopefully did a great job of amplifying all of those voices. So it's been a heck of a run so far, and I'm thankful. But right now, I start thinking about the things that I missed out on as I went through this whole leadership process, and one of them was the coaching. Because I think we're all thrown into a position of leadership without like being taught how to lead. Like you get to these positions because you were good at the job that you were currently doing. But then who's telling you, who's teaching you how to run a staff meeting? Like who's teaching you how to, really dive into conversations with really upset people or really happy people or board members or community members? Nobody's talking to you about that stuff. So now I get a chance to really kind of dive in and help coach people in some of those things that I just wish I would have had more opportunity to coach, to get the coaching over the course of the first 8 years of this, because I was just like trying to navigate as best I could and stay afloat. Now it just gives me a chance to really help them and try to get them more momentum as they go through.
Joe, what were, you talk about that transition, and I love that. So I've been sitting in leadership for a long time, and I often think about that next step. What were your personal biggest challenges going from that principal seat to being a district leader? What did you think was the most difficult transition for you?
Oh, the politics, easily. I mean, I think that when it comes down to it, the decision that you make is the decision that the district is going to look to you, and it comes across your desk. You have to sign the form on whatever that decision is. And you can empower everybody, and you should empower everybody. But at the end of the day, if the decision goes south, it comes to your desk. That's just what it is. And I think there's a political aspect of what happens there too. And I think we've got to, if we can help people, work with boards and work with communities and develop momentum for when it all hits the fan, then you put yourself in a situation where you don't lose all your credibility in one decision. Everybody in that seat has to make a very difficult decision. Everybody, no matter, at some point, you will have to make a difficult decision. And every interaction that you have leading up to that decision is going to determine how that decision is taken by those that you lead. So what are we doing to build up some momentum? I think that's the biggest difference for me, was seeing that, I was in charge, quote, of everything. I didn't have my hands in everything, but I was in charge of everything. So even if something went sideways, it's on me on some level. And I think that was a really interesting component to what we were doing.
So Joe, I'm going to backtrack for a second here. And I know you talked about this for a little bit, but who or what inspired you to enter the field of education, and who currently motivates you, even though now you're retired? There's got to be motivation behind you. There's more to this story. I know that for a fact. You just don't stop. I get that. I know how you're wired. I see it all over social media. But again, who inspired you to get into education, and who currently motivates you now?
I think I mentioned my basketball coach, Tom Nices, was the one. I was doing a camp with him in high school. I was a senior in high school, and I was doing like a youth camp, and we were doing some dribbling drills and everything like that. And I'm running these kids through these drills, and I got the whole camp there. It's 150 kids there, and they're going all over the place. We're running them through drills and stuff like that, and I'm kind of coordinating everything. And we were right towards the end of the first session of a 2-session morning, and he just, as everybody went off on there, to shoot free throws or whatever, he came over to me and he had this huge smile. And he's like, "This is what you need to do." Because the way that the kids reacted to you was incredible. He said, "But I've been working with you for 3 years. I don't know if I've ever seen you this happy." So when you see somebody that has that, looking out for you like that, it changes the way that you operate. And when he could see that the joy came from working with kids, then he wanted to make sure that I just didn't gloss over it and go to the next thing, which I did in high school. I just well, that sounds like fun. Let's go next. Whatever's next, maybe. So I think that was a pretty big deal. Now, currently, I think we have to think about, my motivation changes a little bit now, only because for the last 13 years, 12 as the superintendent and 1 as the principal in Fall Creek, my motivation was very simple. And that was that I needed more people to see the incredible things that were happening in our building than had seen them before I got there. That was it. I wanted everybody in the world to know how great these people were at their jobs. And I wanted to make sure that when we had opportunities to speak about some of the great things, that we highlighted everything that was going on in that building, because I saw these people change lives every day. At the same time, when they go and they go and they go and they do and they do and they do, and they never take a step back to realize the impact, then they start to wonder why they're even doing it. So my goal was very simple. It was just to make sure that there were more eyes, hearts, feelings, the whole thing, on the people in Fall Creek, Wisconsin. And now it's a little bit different because, I still am connected there, and my daughter goes there, and I love every part of who they are and what they continue to do. But now I think the biggest thing for me is if we could make other people feel the way that our group felt as we went through this process, then I think we're going to win that all day. And I think I told our group that if you feel the way that I feel when I talk about you, then you're going to feel great. And now I think about it now when I work with other groups. If we can help people build momentum so they don't feel like they're isolated and alone in a job that gets isolating and lonely, then we put ourselves in a different position. And I have like, I have two guys in particular, Tom Murray and Jimmy Casas, who I talk to on a very regular basis. And I think those guys push me because I think it's not that they don't head nod, right? They're like, oh, you're doing great. You're doing great. Like if you're wrong, they'll tell you that you're wrong. And and we try to build some momentum for each other by making sure that we're really at our best every time that we go out and speak to a group of people, because we know that every time that we go in, it's an investment, and we don't want people to walk out going, well, that was pretty good, I guess. We want them to feel like they've really found something that's going to help them build momentum. And that makes it, I take that very seriously. And I think that, so what pushes me right now is this constant idea that there's no certainty financially. There's no certainty in terms of how often you get to do this. And, I think there's this fear in the back of my head that's like, what if it all ends? And I like, I'm awful with that. But I think that if I can continue to help people build momentum for themselves, then I think I've done my job along the way.
I love that right there. And that's going to be stolen by a bunch of people out there, how to build momentum for people around you and in yourself. That's great right there.
Thanks.
So a big shout out to Principal Cafele. Thank you for being here.
I see him up there. My guy. I'll tell you, I saw that he put down that I was in a van again. Yeah, I did his podcast in a van. I do the weekly show in a van. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I do have a house. People are wondering, like, do you even live I do. I have a house. It's nice. It's fine. Like, but apparently every time I'm speaking to groups, here it is. So I love the work that Brody does. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love how he leans in to people. I love that when he goes places and he speaks to groups, he takes the time to spend a little extra time with the people who spend time with him on the weekends, in terms of all the AP stuff that he does, in terms of the weekly stuff and the shows and the connections. I think. See, that's a really cool thing, because it's not even about the content and trying to get people the resources to get better. He's deliberately building relationships with people in spaces that they wouldn't always know that those are going to be built. And I think that just when you're in charge of caring for others, then all of a sudden you've got to model what that looks like. And he's as good as it comes when it comes down to modeling what it looks like outside of that space. So I'm honored that he's here. I love watching him do his thing. And I won't say bam, because I won't give it the same impact, but I'm proud to know him. So.
Right. It's very true. Jefe is that way. Hey, and also a big shout out. Thank you, Nick, for being here like always. Hey, Joe, and I would be remiss, we didn't finish with Go Crickets.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to end.
It's always Go Crickets, man. It's always Go Crickets.
Yeah, you threw a whole thing. I was waiting for the catchphrase. I was waiting for it, for the branding. And I'm glad, because you're one of the top people I've met that brand stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
So you know what? Now that you've finished that chapter of the superintendency and public education, and you're into a new venue. Looking back, I know there's thousands of examples. Can you look back on one of those pop moments? A pop moment is something that hit your spirit, that uplifted you to Saturn, because either a connection that you made with a kid, a connection you made with an adult, I don't know, something. You had that pop that forever was a blank check in your spirit as a human being. And also, is there a moment that you faced that you handled something wrong and you said, next time that won't happen again? So can you give someone one of those pop moments, and then one of those oops?
Yeah. So if we're not gonna be able to do the oops thing, because it's literally 3 hours of stuff that I've screwed up. In fact, the last Lead From Where You Are, the book that I had just written, was it's literally just a conglomeration of everything I messed up. Like, that's it. Like, honestly, you want to know what I messed up? That's where all the stuff is. In fact, a lot of those walk to work videos that I do, and we did 100 of them. I would say half of them are just stuff that I screwed up. And I just don't want people to screw it up the way that I did. So I think the two things that have happened that I think have been the biggest things in terms of connecting and made me think a little bit differently about the way that we do the work that we do. So Chip and Dan Heath wrote a great book called The Power of Moments. And in it, they talk about how the science of why people remember things and why they don't remember other things, right? And one of the things they get really deep into is what do you do to break the script? For people, when you break the script, you allow people to be in a situation where they can remember things better. Okay. So a couple of things that we've done when it came to breaking the script, one in particular, the one pop moment that I had when I was breaking the script was 2006, and I'll never forget it. 2006, I was in a different school district actually, and we were hiring a third grade teaching position, and we were ready to hire this third grade teacher, and she was wonderful, and we couldn't wait to offer the job. But I was in a bigger district, so we had to go through a lot of red tape to get to this place. And the two other third grade teachers kept coming into my office every day, and say, "Did you offer the job? We're going to lose her. We're going to lose out. If you don't offer the job, we're going to lose her. What are we going to do if we don't get her? What are we going to do?" And they kept coming back and back. And I kept saying, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. And ironically, on the day that I got the okay, they came into my office still jacked up going, "When are you going to call her? We got to call her. We're going to lose her. We're going to lose her." And I finally just said to him, "You know what? Why don't you just call her? Why don't you call? You know what? You can call the people that didn't get the job too if you want. I don't care." Right? I said, "Why don't you just call her and offer her the job?" And they went into my office and they closed the door and they put it on speakerphone and they dialed the number. And after about 30 seconds, I heard this scream. And then about 5 seconds later, I heard this other scream. And they came out and they had tears in their eyes. And they were so happy. Like, she said yes. And then they walked out, and I turned to my secretary, Betsy, and I said, "I'll never not do it like this again, ever. I'll always involve the committee in terms of what that job offer looks like." Because the joy that we just provided to those two women was incredible. And they just walked out. They walked down the hallway, and they had tears. Probably don't want to have tears in your eyes coming out of the principal's office. Different story. But at the same time, they were walking down, and people asked them, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And they got to tell the story. And when they got to tell the story, it completely changed the way that we offered positions, which essentially gave us a better opportunity for hires because of the way that we offer positions. And we've been over the top on offering positions since 2006. And I think a lot of people will see, I still speak about it today, and people are like, "That's a really great idea." That idea is almost like, what is that, 18 years old or 17 years old at this point? I mean, we've been doing it for a long time. So I think that's been the big pop moment. And I think the biggest problem for me was in my first year as a principal. I had this woman in our building. She was so wonderful, but she always had one really big problem with me. And the big problem was I was like the quote jockey, man. I was awful. I just put a quote up and I'd be like, "We got to live like this." It was horrible. And one of the things that I always used to say was, "We need to work smarter, not harder," which is, great if you give examples, but if you just say it out loud, it just is ridiculous. So I said in a meeting, I said to everybody, "We got to work smarter, not harder. We got to work smarter, not harder." And she got so mad after the meeting. She came into my office and she said, "It makes me so angry when you say that." And this is my first year as a principal. I'm 29 years old. I know everything. Of course, I know absolutely everything. And I said to her, she was in my office and the door was closed. And I said, "Go over to the door and pull it." And she went over and she pulled it and it didn't move. I said, "Pull it harder." And she pulled it harder. No. I said, "Pull it as hard as you can." She pulled it hard. And I said, "Now turn the knob and pull it." And I sat there like I had just split the atom. Like I had just delivered the most incredible philosophical quote of all time, because I had to be right instead of being real. And in that moment, I lost her completely. My arrogance, because I had to be right, because I had to prove it, I lost her for like a year. And we talked about it and worked it out as well as we could, but it was never the same. It was not, and it's my fault. It's 100% my fault because I had to be right. And when I had to be right, I couldn't be real with her. And then I lost her. And thankfully, I didn't do it in front of a huge group of people. I would have lost everybody at that point. But she was willing to forgive me, but it was never the same. And I think that's probably that's to this day, the biggest like whiff when it came down to what happens when in terms of leadership.
I love that you learned that. I love that you recognize the fact when you're young and you have all the answers in leadership, because I think we've all been there, and it takes being humbled multiple times to realize the fact that we are a conduit for people to get where they need to be. And if you guys out there, you're young in these positions, think about that for a second. So Joe, throughout your career, you've written many books. Okay, here, tell a young, inspiring leader right now how hard it is to make time to write a book while leading either a district or a school. How did you do that? What was that like?
I think the first couple that I wrote with Tony Sinanis, and it was great. We were just like, I think we were just kind of writing down some of this. That was at the time where branding wasn't even a thing. Like we had been doing all this stuff for years, but the power of branding, we wrote on how do you just amplify the voices or telling the school story. And I think that whole model of telling your school story has actually gotten really watered down. Like everybody talks about it, but we don't talk about leveraging the school story. We just talk about telling it. And if I tell my story right now, if I was to turn this off and just go start talking about how great Fall Creek is in the woods here, nothing happens. I got to figure out ways to leverage the story to make sure that those hearing the story are able to move the story further than just the one person that's hearing the story. So anyway, I think that's the big thing that we try to put ourselves in a situation is like we were just putting our stuff together. Then when we got to Hacking Leadership, it was kind of the same thing. We asked about 100 people, 100 leaders across the country, what's the biggest problem that you're having in school? And then we came up with the 10 common thoughts and then 10 ways to fix those problems. So those are the two things. And then the last one, Lead From Where You Are, was really about finding a way to build momentum. Now, when it came down to where I found the time, I think when you find purpose in the work, you find time for the purpose in that work. And I think that specifically with the last book, with Lead From Where You Are, I found myself jumping out of bed in the morning at 5 o'clock, 5:15, and I am not a morning person, but I found myself jumping out because I kept seeing not only I was putting stuff out there that I liked, but it was keeping me sharp in terms of what I did in school, and that's been about a year removed at this point. About 2 years actually removed at this point. And so now it's a little different because now I'm starting a project, or I'm in the middle of a project that it's just a little bit different because I have more time, but it's just different time, and I think, doing the books while I was in school was awesome because it kept me sharp. And it made me think about all the stuff that we were doing. And now I want to make sure that I don't forget the stuff. So we're putting that together. And that project hopefully will come out, I don't know, hopefully, end of the school year is what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. Thank you.
So right now, due to the exodus in education of superintendents leaving, of administrators, principals moving up to superintendents, so on and so forth, the ripple effect always takes place. And you know that there are administrators being hired right now to start the job in January.
Yeah.
So what would you say? And the question I'm about to ask you would normally be a 2-day workshop that you lead, you, Jimmy, Principal Cafele. But what would be some of the quick look fors if you're a brand new administrator walking into a low performing campus? Because you know what? After the New Year cheer comes in and you take the keys to the building, the reality hits you in the face when they walk in.
Yeah.
So
the first thing that I would do is I'd be really careful about jumping into anything. I just told the story with Jimmy last week. I said, when you come back, if your first staff meeting in 2024, if your first staff meeting starts with, I read this book over break, like you're going to want to get out of the way real quick because something's coming at you real hard. You're going to duck, get out of the way. Something's bad. Because I think when people go away from buildings and leaders have the time in the building where nobody's around, they start to think about all the ways they're going to fix the building. Well, if you're trying to fix the building alone and you just tell people how you're going to fix the building when they come back, you've just overwhelmed them and you're not going to get any momentum. at all. So I would say the first thing to do is just listen. And honestly, people think that we don't listen enough. And I was like this. We don't listen enough. And we go real quick, and then we look behind us and nobody's there. So when you think about what can you do, the first thing is I'd listen and make sure that you put yourself in a situation where you don't just listen. Everybody does the entry meeting, right? Like you go in, you do the entry meeting. You're like, I want to be here for you. I want to make sure that I'm meeting your needs. I want to make sure that I'm doing what you need. I want to make sure that I support the work that you're doing. And then the next thing you know, it's like 6 months later and you go to check in. Well, how are things going? Well, you haven't talked to these people in 6 months. So not only do you go in and do the initial, what can I do for you? And what do you believe? And what do you feel? And all the initial conversation, but schedule your times to get in there, back in there 3 weeks, 4 weeks out to make sure that they know that it wasn't just a one-time thing. And then again, in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, however big your building is. But I think we do the initial consult really well. And then you like, all of a sudden it's May. And you're like, oh, I got to get in everybody's classroom right now, make sure they're doing okay. So put yourself in a spot where you like. I scheduled stuff out, and I'd walk around school, and I'd come back to my office, and I'd check off where I was because it was really easy to get to certain areas of the building, and it was harder to get to other areas of the building. And when I looked at the sheet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've only spent time in like these classrooms. I didn't even realize it. So be cognizant about where you are, and for me, I charted it, and I don't apologize for that. Nobody knew that. I didn't care, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just stuck in one spot. So I think the first thing is listen, but the second thing is follow up. The third thing that I would tell you that I don't think leaders do enough, and I literally have, honestly, if I was to give 2 pieces of advice, only 2, and talk about them literally every day for the rest of my life. I know they work. I know that you'll get momentum if you do them, but and I know that you'll be happier in your job when you do them. Like if I was to tell you that, like you're going to lean into that all day. And the first one and the most important one, and the thing that we've done in Fall Creek that I think has had the biggest impact on the work that we do is what are we doing to recognize the greatness of our colleagues, acknowledge the greatness of our colleagues, and extend the greatness of our colleagues. Right? And of our colleagues is important because it's really hard to take care of kids when we're not taking care of the adults, taking care of the kids. So if we put ourselves in a situation where like in my building, it looks like this. If I'm walking down a 2nd grade hallway and I see a 2nd grade teacher doing great things, I walk into that 2nd grade teacher's room to tell that 2nd grade teacher that she's doing great things, right? I've recognized it and I've acknowledged it. And a lot of people do that. But when you do the third thing, when you extend the conversation to the 8th grade science teacher who has no business of being in the 2nd grade hallway, and you tell the 8th grade science teacher about the incredible things happening in 2nd grade, what inevitably happens is the 8th grade science teacher walks to the 2nd grade teacher's classroom to tell a 2nd grade teacher that she's doing great things. And the reason that he does it is because at some point somebody did it for him and it felt good. So if we're always in this situation, we're recognizing, acknowledging, and extending. What happens when you become the conduit, when you become the connector, like you were talking about, Dean, when you become the connector for that, and you're the person that recognizes, acknowledges, and extends, now you become the conduit for great stories. I can't take all the garbage off your plate. People are going to come and they're going to be mad. Parents are going to be mad. Community members mad. Kids mad. Teachers mad. Support staff mad. They're going to be mad. But if it's the only thing that you hear all the time, you start to wonder why you're even doing it. So when you become the connector for great stories, then all of a sudden you put yourself in a position where those stories find you. 2 weeks before the school year was out, I was sitting in the middle school hallway between passing period, right? And people, you know this, it smelled. I'm just going to tell you it smelled. I mean, it's body odor or Axe. Nothing in the middle, just body odor and Axe. And I'm standing there and these people are walking past me and 3 teachers came up to me, 3, as I'm standing there and just told me a story about a colleague. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't prompt them, nothing. They just walked up to me, told me a story about a colleague and just went on. Well, they're not dumb. They know exactly what I'm going to do. As soon as I hear that story, I'm going to go tell the person that was being talked about that they were being talked about and by who was talking about it. So now I become the connector for great stories. And when I'm the connector for great stories, then I'm not stuck in the situation where I'm only hearing the garbage that happens. That stuff is going to happen. But if you put yourself in a spot where you become the conduit for great stories, now you walk with more purpose and people find you as well.
And that leads to branding at a whole new level too, if you think
Absolutely.
about it, because now the people in the trenches start taking care of that. Joe, switch gears for a second. Let's talk about, you talk about connecting with the adults in the building. Now let's talk about how do personnel in buildings connect with kids and build their leadership skills, because the kids are the people, they are the sponges of the school. They are the ones with a loud voice on how things are going. Talk about that if you could for a moment.
Well, I think the first thing that we have to think about is we're and I've heard it a bazillion times. We're trying to create the leaders of tomorrow, or we want kids to be great leaders when they leave. Why are we waiting till they leave to lead, right? So what leadership opportunities are we giving them when they're there, and what does it really look like? And are they willing to actually do it? And I think a lot of times it starts with a conversation. I mean, and I think you got to be cognizant of who you are, where you're going, and what that looks like, because it was really, I could jump into a kindergarten class, well, as long as I could leave the kindergarten classroom, because bless every kindergarten teacher ever, like, wow. Okay. But I could go in there and connect with kids and leave and be great. I loved working with those. But when I came to middle school, specifically high school kids, it was a little bit harder for me, because I didn't have a lot of experience in that spot. So I just started asking a lot of questions. And that's all I could do, is ask questions about not only what was going well, what do they want changed, but at least when it came down to it, they knew that you were there to listen. And my favorite part was when they would come up to me and just talk about nothing, to be really honest, because then I knew that they trusted me enough to actually come in and have conversations. And I think that's where you start to develop some leadership opportunities. And so one of the things that we did years ago was we started this capstone project. It's wonderful. And it allows our kids do these passion projects in high school. They essentially could learn anything they want. It's part of their school day. And then at the end of the year, they do a capstone. A capstone presentation to people in the industry. So let's say that you are doing some work you're really into construction, and you want to provide X, Y, or Z when it comes to construction. When you come in and do your presentation, we're going to call people from the community in that are in that field that allow you to present to a group of people who that's their job. So now we've connected the people in the community to the people at school and to the kids at school, and allow them to lead in a way that allows them not only to perform in front of a group, but that gives them the opportunity to actually be employed once they leave. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest things that we've done in terms of leadership, because we allow people to we allow kids to guide their own learning when it comes down to what they want. I mean, you think about it, if you're really dead set on getting into a certain career and you're going to go to college for that career, and you're 3 years into that college stint before you decide, man, this is not for me, right? You've now wasted a ton of money and a ton of time. Right? So if we can have people start thinking about what their interests are in high school, and they get into it for 6 to 8 months and learn about it, and then they're like, I don't like this at all. It saves them time on and money, and it puts them in a situation where they can go see some great things and connect in a different way. So I think that's kind of where we try to get the leadership opportunities for our kids as much as we can.
In your book, you talk about highs and lows that administrators can face pending the situation. What are some of those highs and lows? I know, again, that's a whole day's that's a whole day, but right now, just to give a quick review of what you cover in the book, just to say, hey guys, when you choose a chair and you wanted to be in that chair, talk to us. Something that administrator that's starting in January, what are some of the highs and lows that might face?
I think the first thing that we want to do is make sure that you put yourself in the right position to see great things, right? Like, think about what I do with groups a lot is I tell them, write down the first 8 things that you do when you get to school every day, right? And then they write them all down, and they say, how many of those 8 things bring you joy? And where are they on the list? Are they at the beginning, and are they not even on your list? Because if you get to the things that bring you joy and they're like 6, 7, 8 on your list, and the first 5 things really put you in a bad position, now all of a sudden you're not going to see great things anymore. So can you flip some of that stuff to make sure that you see the great things that are happening around you so you don't get bound by the list? I thought about it when I was thinking about it. The idea that I keep coming back to was I'm a checklist person, and I write stuff down and check it off as I go along. And then I would walk to places to do something to check it off my list. And I kept thinking to myself, how many things am I walking past to get to the next thing on my list? And would any of the things that I have walked past, would they have brought me enough joy to bring me back the next day feeling good about the work that we do? So what are we really doing? Find ways to put yourself in a situation to see some of the great things. So when you do have those lows, they're not as low because you know you're going to see some of the other great stuff going on.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, for sure.
So Joe, you speak around the country. You've been everywhere. You're highly sought after as a motivator and someone who really understands the educational stuff behind what you do. So when did you first present at a conference? How did it go? How did you feel? How did it evolve? I mean, that's stepping out of a comfort zone. We talk about building capacity in others. When you first did that, you must have been like, man, you know what? I can orchestrate in my own district, my own classrooms, my own school. Now the audience just became bigger. How was it? What was it like for you?
Yeah. So I started speaking probably in 2013. I think that was probably when I started. Well, maybe 2000. Actually, no, that's not true. I started in 2010. So I would say probably 2011. My first year in Fall Creek, and I just kept going to little conferences, anybody that would take me and to speak. And I just kept going. I kept thinking about all the stuff that these incredible people in our building were doing and how I could shine more light on those things. And so I just kept going to like places and doing, talking about branding, talking about connecting, talking about leadership on a certain level. But it really kind of came back to what are you doing to tell your school story and leverage your school story? I mean, for the first 5 years, that's probably all I did because I thought that was the biggest need when it came to schools, because when people don't know what you do in a school, they make up what you do in a school. And a lot of times when they make up what you do, it's based on what happened to them 25 years ago, and they're still jacked up that they didn't get a second chicken sandwich or something. So then all people are talking about these things and you don't get a chance to talk about these, what's going on, because people are hesitant because of how they're being treated in the community. So I started doing that in like 2011 or 2012. And then I just kept going to all of these things. And then when we got to like 2013, 14, we started to involve our teachers more in it. And then that to me was incredible, because once we got to like 2015 and 16 and people started recognizing the Go Cricket stuff and knowing about Go Cricket stuff and being, like not having any idea where Fall Creek, Wisconsin was, but knowing what the mascot was and what the school colors were and everything around with it, right? So in 2016, we started taking groups. And so when the real momentum for me came when I would take people to our group to a conference, and they'd get into their room to present, and it was packed, like standing room only. And the way that these people at conferences reacted to our group, like I just sat there. I can't even talk about it. All I wanted was that's all I wanted for them was to be looked at like that. And so when it happened, I'm like, I want more of that. I want more of that. I want more of that. And so we kind of kept doing it. And then I started doing some of the leadership stuff, and it kind of just evolved a little bit more and a little bit more. But it really started with essentially making sure that we could put our people in a position to be seen, heard, and valued.
Great stuff.
So let's close off by my Saturday morning starts off with these two guys with erratic schedules.
Yeah.
Erratic schedules. Yeah, there's no set time. We got a set time for the Fantastic Four, but I got no set time for Jimmy and Joe. So tell the audience, and look, the reason we ask sometimes some of these questions is I know for a fact, I've talked to people that don't know who Joe Sanfelippo is and Jimmy Casas is. because they're not in that
Yeah.
niche. They stay away from that. They hardly listen to podcasts. So these are great vehicles
Right.
to get those people that do not. And there's administrators been around that don't play with this at all, to not brand.
Right.
So it's crucial, and it's horrible, through blood in my ears. So can you tell people out there about your podcast with Jimmy and yourself?
Yeah, so we do a podcast on a weekend, the weekly show on Saturdays typically, and we just try. All we do is, honestly, Jimmy and I started doing it because I love him like a brother, and but we were running in so many different directions that we never really got a chance to talk. We'd talk like, "Hey, how you doing? How are things going? You getting to the place that you're going, whatever." But we didn't get a chance to like talk about what we wanted to, which was the whole how do we grow leaders. Or how do we help leaders? I mean, who knows? But so we did this show because we thought this forces us to sit down and talk every week, and it has for the most part. We try to do it every week if we can, but I think the biggest thing for us is how are we creating opportunities for people to not only create value for those they serve, but create momentum for them as well. And that's been really fun to do. And I think we've done, and the walk to work videos have been great. I did 100 walk to work videos when I was walking across the street to Fall Creek on a Saturday, and I love those. And that's the next project. The project is putting those into a book, and that's been fun so far. And I think the idea that we want to keep in mind with that is that there are just so many great ideas out there. And I don't have a monopoly on any of them. Jimmy doesn't have a monopoly on any of them. We just are trying to help the best that we can. And my hope is that you listen to the podcast and you're like, oh, half of it. Yeah, I do that. Awesome. So it feels good about the work that you're doing. But maybe you get a couple things here and there. And we like to laugh a little bit, tell some stories, and move on. So that's probably you find me on all social media channels, and if I can help out, then that's what we're here for.
Joe, think about all your years in the journey, years in the business. And if you can kind of circle back for a second, and you have these young kids coming out of college right now, you have these teachers who have been in the position of teaching children for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, ready to make the leap into leadership. What do you tell them about the evolution of the field of education? There are people that are tired. There are people that are leaving this profession. I always try to tell people, don't be so hard on yourself. Give yourself grace. Understand that things are a process. But what would Joe Sanfelippo say to them who's gone full circle?
First thing I'd tell them is they don't know everything. So don't pretend to know everything, because everybody knows you don't know everything. And when you pretend to know everything, you always lose all your credibility. So don't pretend to know everything. It's okay to tell them that you don't. It's okay to say that you need help. It's okay to ask for permission to help, to ask them to help you or whatever. Like, you don't know everything, and that's okay. So lean into each other and find ways to build people up as much as you can. And honestly, for me, go back to that recognize, acknowledge, extend model, and just keep being the connector for great things happening in your space. And you'll develop the momentum to not only shout about the great things that are happening, but when you do that and you help people to feel seen and heard and valued, then you're not hiring a bunch of positions, because they're going to stay, right? So like it all comes back to, what are you doing to create value for the people that you serve? And if you create value for the people you serve, you're not going to need to find new people.
Pretty simple answer, isn't it, right there? One would think that we get in our own way sometimes, and we don't realize how simple that it can be. And I wanted to give you a platform to say that, because I love hearing you talk about that. And you do that almost every day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So good. Josh, wrap this up, man, because I'll tell you what, Joe's still waiting. It's probably about 0 degrees out there right now as he's waiting for his daughter. But
it's 20.
Even better. Even better. What a way to end the year, Joe. I mean, thank you so much. I mean, we appreciate you joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're in Texas. We don't understand that number 20. You guys enjoy it up there in the New England area, right? We don't need none of that nonsense down here. So, hey, thank you very much for being here. Hey, Dean, this is the wrap of 2023. I can't say it's not over. It is over for a couple of weeks. 2024, Dean Packard's going to start booking all these great guests again, like Joe Sanfelippo, for the flagship show, for office hours, for the Red Zone, ready to rock and roll in 2024. And hey, we do have it's not over. Principal Cafele, we will be on his show December the 30th, the Fantastic Four, talking on a round table kind of conversation. So join us on Principal Cafele's platform, December the 30th. Join us. Be there or be square. What do you think about that, Dean Packard?
I'll tell you what a way to end is like fireworks and the 4th of July in the middle of winter. Hey, Joe, once again, thank you so much. Josh, always a pleasure. Don't forget, we're here for kids, staff in our communities every single day, doing what we can to become a little bit better. Everybody out there, have a great holiday season. Relax, enjoy, and be ready for what comes your way in 2024.